As the Second World War drags on, a German U-boat crew beats the odds to defy depth charges and aircraft to continue to sink Allied ships and still return to port.
The fact that they overcame the damages, that they were able to survive constant air interruptions. I believe that on this patrol, there were 73 crash dives and still make it home in one piece is remarkable.
But in early 1944, a new Allied hunter-killer group targets the U-boats. Now U-515 faces the ultimate test. In World War II, a subsea weapon allows warriors to fight from beneath the waves. Cunning, force, and tenacity, their enemies strike back. Revolutionary, but still sometimes primitive. It's a desperate bid to change the course of war. Their stories are legend. November 18th, 1943. Nazi U-boat U-515 spots a massive Allied convoy off the coast of Portugal. 12 escorts guard 66 ships, including 11 tank landing ships destined for the D-Day invasions. Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz had assigned 26 submarines to find the convoy.
Because of the size of this convoy, because it was picked up by German intelligence, Dönitz decided to make an all-out effort to try to intercept this convoy.
U-boat commander Kapitan Lieutenant Werner Henke must share the ship's location with the other submarines. He surfaces 12 miles away to transmit a message. But an Allied plane attacks, forcing Henke to dive. The U-boat is unable to transmit its crucial message. U-515 is on its own. The plane banks away, but while at periscope depth, Henke sights 2 warships breaking off from the escort screen. They are coming right for him. This is Henke's 5th war patrol. His first was only the year before, when he racked up an impressive 9 kills. He has already earned the title of U-boat ace. This achievement is impressive, as German U-boats now struggle against Allied air and radar superiority and have been forced to retreat from the main convoy routes across the Atlantic. Henke's success makes him notorious. He is named in an Allied propaganda broadcast in March 1943.
They will blame Werner Henke for the shooting of survivors of the British liner Ceramic.
And Henke is also unpopular at home.
He's very much an outsider within the German Navy in a service that values reserve, reflection, and self-discipline. Werner Henke is kind of the opposite of all of those.
His own crew sometimes resents him. He keeps them aboard U-515 when many of the petty officers would qualify for a higher rank or promotion aboard other U-boats. But Henke has an important ally in Dönitz.
Dönitz appreciates a maverick. Dönitz was willing to make exceptions for Henke when he sees that he does produce as well as he does.
Now, Henke leads his men to face 2 enemy warships alone. The ships have a top speed of 20 knots, and Henke can't outrun them. The only way U-515 can survive is to attack. Henke prepares to launch one of the Kriegsmarine's newest weapons, the T-5 acoustic torpedo.
It was a cutting-edge technology of the time. Now you had a kind of acoustic homing device.
Los!
After the torpedo left, this homing device directed it to the source of the greatest noise, which usually was the propeller of some kind of vessel.
But the torpedo misses. The ships continue their charge and close in on U-515. While sonar usually helps to find submerged U-boats, it isn't perfect. Importantly, the ships can't detect their target as they travel at high speed. When they slow down and hone in, they have another problem.
When you're carrying out an attack, you lose contact before you fire depth charges over the stern.
Henke remains determined to surface and send the message to U-boat headquarters. When the ships fail to launch their depth charges, he creeps back to periscope depth. It's a mistake.
The periscope is the main sensor of the submarine in many ways, certainly the main visual sensor, but the trouble is if you put it up, you become vulnerable. You say, I am here, come and attack me.
But with a view of his target, Henke orders the men to fire another homing torpedo.
Los!
Topside, Lieutenant Commander Robert Bristow orders HMS Chanticleer to charge toward the last periscope sighting, about 2,000 yards away.
Depth
He
charges.
directs his men to ready 10 depth charges. The crew launches the first 2. Just then, Henke's torpedo hits home.
The rudder was actually blown out of the water and comes crashing back onto the ship. Very nasty damage indeed.
The blast kills 30 crewmen. But Henke doesn't even know he scored a hit. A depth charge explodes at almost the same time.
110 Meter Tiefe.
Henke dives deeper to evade. Despite the damage, Chanticleer's crew fights on.
You can't keep a good ship down. If this ship is in sonar contact, even though it's in deep trouble, then it will continue to engage.
Within minutes, Chanticleer's sonar does regain contact of U-515. The ruined ship's gunners fire rapidly at the bubbling water, where the depth charges have just gone off. They hope to further wound the U-boat if it starts to surface. While seawater gushes in through U-515's exhaust valves.
The depth charges of Chanticleer caused major damage on the U-boat. Major damage, but not deadly damage. So, for instance, the air compressor was torn off his mountings, but it was not damaged.
Henke wants to escape the attack with the U-boat's natural advantage, diving. If he can get away and resurface, he can inform headquarters of the convoy's location. But above, the second enemy ship now tracks U-515's every move. Over the next 3 hours, HMS Crane's sonar pinpoints U-515's location 7 times.
We've got sonar contact. Range 1,500 yards, bearing 270.
Each time, they draw patterns of 10 depth charges. With each barrage, Henke's men desperately plug leaks and make essential repairs. But time and their air is running out.
A World War II U-boat, when it was submerged, had only a very limited supply of air. With a raised stress level, the crew consumed more oxygen. Even more if they were hard working doing emergency repairs.
U-515 has struck 1 British warship. The U-boat's survival requires they escape another.
Auf 100 Meter tiefer gehen.
Henke orders they change course rapidly, twisting and turning U-515 to evade the depth charge attacks.
Steuerbord 15 Grad.
Finally, the U-boat shakes off HMS Crane. The hydrophone operator tells Henke that the enemy ship has moved off.
2 Knoten.
U-515 comes to the surface for some much-needed fresh air and to assess the damage.
The U-boat had suffered tremendous damage. It was heavily punished by the depth charges. There was not only leaks, they had to try to counterbalance the U-boat and stop it from sinking.
Henke's engineering staff report on the U-boat's condition. Senior Engineer Officer Georg Monken recommends returning to port to have the submarine repaired. Junior Engineer Officer Gunther Altenberger disagrees. To return to Lorient, they must cross the Bay of Biscay also known as the graveyard of the U-boats. The Allies can heavily patrol this body of water with aircraft based out of the United Kingdom. Damage to U-515 would make them easy to find.
They also lost oil, and of course this oil went up to the surface and left a trail, very much like a blood trail, leading a hunter to a wounded deer.
In U-515's current condition, Altenberger argues, they'll be as good as dead. Henke must decide. November 1943. After a deadly encounter with British warships, U-boat commander Werner Henke must choose. The senior engineer officer thinks the damage is so severe, they must return to port immediately. Junior engineer officer Gunther Altenberger recommends they repair the worst of the leaks and damage before making the long journey home. Henke decides to follow the junior engineer officer's advice. On November 22nd, U-515 tucks in near the Canary Islands. Hidden from sight, the crew repairs the U-boat as best they can. Mostly due to Altenberger's exceptional work, U-515 is operational in just 2 days.
Of course, there is a limit for every U-boat about the damage it can take.
Auftauchen!
So this was the warning by the engineer, just to avoid any further damage, to make sure that they could get back to the home base safely.
Despite the recommendation, Henke cannot avoid the lure of enemy ships. He sinks 2 British freighters and a motor ship on the West African coast before he finally heads to port.
The U-boat virtually is a floating wreck. The only thing they can do is try to limp home.
It proves difficult to even maintain power. The attacks also damage the batteries, and they won't hold a charge. Since then, they've had to recharge constantly. Until now, it hasn't been a problem to remain on the surface. They still have to return to Lorient through the Bay of Biscay. And without battery power, the U-boat loses its ability to dive to protect itself. January 10th, 1944. U-515 enters the Bay of Biscay. Henke tries to surface 4 times to recharge their batteries. And each time, enemy aircraft force U-515 back under. Submerged, they travel very slowly off the coast of neutral Spain. At 4 p.m., after 22 hours, the batteries finally die. The electric motors lose power and cut out. In the deep waters of the open ocean, this would be a disaster. Fortunately, the waters along the coast are shallow, and U-515 settles on the sea floor. Henke has enough power to get to the surface one last time, but must wait until nightfall. The RAF patrols over the Bay of Biscay have been unrelenting.
By this period in the war, anti-submarine measures are extremely effective. And the Bay Offensive, as it's called, is becoming pretty effective. You have airplanes equipped with high-frequency radar. If the submarine is trying to cross, the sensors are now available to make the airplane a very effective weapon indeed.
The U-boat crew knows it is futile to resurface before dusk. The men stay down for another excruciating 3 hours. Once darkness falls, Henke orders U-515 to the surface with a last blast of the ballast tanks. The diesel engines roar to life. If another patrol plane spots them, they're in trouble. They may not be able to dive and resurface again. But their luck holds. The sky remains clear of enemy aircraft.
Henke tries to take the least risk to get back to his home base. He follows the coast of Spain because Spain is neutral. And then he tries to get only about the minimum stretch of open sea back to Lorient and into safety.
On the morning of January 14th, U-515's relieved lookouts spot 2 German minesweepers, an armed escort into port. Just as they near the finish line, 2 British fighter bombers come out of nowhere and launch an attack. The U-515 will not be defeated this close to home. All 3 German vessels open fire and force the aircraft to retreat. U-515 finally limps into Lorient at 6 p.m.
The most remarkable achievement of this 5th patrol of Henke is not his sinking successes. He was far more successful on his former patrols, but it's this mere achievement of getting back alive to his home base with a badly damaged U-boat. And I think this is a good sign for his qualities as a commander and, of course, the quality of his crew. In this stage of the war, this is absolutely astonishing.
Nearly 11 weeks later, a revitalized U-515 departs from Lorient on March 30th, 1944. That same day, the Allies launch a task group from Casablanca, about 1,000 miles to the south. They call it a hunter-killer group, a tactical combination of destroyers, escorts, carrier, and aircraft. It's unlike anything seen in the war before. The hunter-killer group is the result of Allied successes in enhanced factory production. By June 1943, Allied shipyards produced more destroyer escorts. German dominance in the Atlantic wanes, and vessels are freed up from convoy escort duties. The released ships partner with escort carriers in a special campaign to prevent a German U-boat resurgence.
The hunter-killer group is supposed to connect with a U-boat where we know approximately where it is, but not quite. That's the hunter part. The killer part is once they find it, they have sufficient resources to kill it.
U.S. Navy Task Group 2112 consists of escort carrier USS Guadalcanal, carrying approximately 23 Avenger and Wildcat aircraft, screened by 4 destroyer escorts.
With an escort carrier with a convoy, or an escort carrier near an attack, airplanes are there when they're wanted. Suddenly, instead of a base 1,500 miles away, you're looking at a base 50 miles away. That's all the difference in the world. It's a mobile airfield, and that's really what carriers are about.
They sail under the command of the U.S. Navy's Captain Daniel Gallery. Gallery was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. In 1942, he commanded the U.S. Navy Fleet Air Base in Reykjavik, Iceland, where he received the Bronze Star for exceptional combat operations against the U-boats. In 1943, the U.S. Navy gives him command of his own hunter-killer task group on board the escort carrier, USS Guadalcanal.
Captain Gallery was an aviator. He was creative, and he wanted to see what he could do with his ship. That's a good captain. That's a good officer.
But his first patrol would prove challenging.
USS Guadalcanal's first cruise was something of a disaster. They lost one aircraft that the pilot simply got lost. They had an airplane crash as it was landing on the deck, and it blocked the deck in such a way that the other airplanes weren't able to land. Gallery then simply had the couple of remaining aircraft just land in the water, and they retrieved the crews, so they lost the airplanes that way. At the end of the cruise, they actually had, out of 21 aircraft they had started with, they wound up with 6 that were still operational. Gallery was prepared for some damage here, but it was rather more than probably anybody really expected.
Determined to put their costly lessons to good use, Gallery and his crew are ready to return to the Atlantic. Hundreds of miles away, U-515 escapes the deadly Bay of Biscay unscathed and moves out to the open sea. They receive orders to return to the African Gold Coast to sink Allied shipping.
The mission for Henke has not changed. It's simply about sinking as many vessels as possible.
April 8th, 1944. On board USS Guadalcanal, the atmosphere is charged. Conditions are perfect for an experiment. Night landings have not been attempted on these ships yet, but if they work, it will be a great advantage for the Allies. Gallery is keen to try.
He got interested in night operations. Once you're in the air, night flying is reasonably safe. Your problem comes when you try to land. And you're landing on a small deck. There isn't a lot of lighting because that'll give away the carrier's position. And oh, by the way, you're in the Atlantic Ocean, which does this to your carrier.
At 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, 4 Avenger aircraft take off from the deck of USS Guadalcanal.
Go ahead.
But at their first check-in, the pilots report that a storm is building. Gallery is disappointed. He had planned a later flight to test the planes in full dark. The weather conditions force him to cancel. But a chance sighting may prove a game changer. U-515 has been spotted by one of Gallery's hunters. They must escape before the rest of the task group close in for the kill. April 1944. German U-boat U-515 heads to Africa's Gold Coast to hunt Allied shipping. These waters used to be safe from land-based Allied aircraft, especially at night. The Avenger has launched from the carrier deck of a new hunter-killer group. The task group commander has also begun to experiment with night flying.
Sir, they made contact with the U-boat.
In the confusion, word of the sighting does not make it to Captain Daniel Gallery. The Avengers return to the USS Guadalcanal.
Gallery's debriefing the pilots, and in the process of that, one of the pilots says, "You know, Skipper, I almost had him." And Gallery is astonished because he hasn't heard about this at all. And the pilot explains, "The submarine? Didn't you get my message?" "No."
Gallery decides the sub must be pursued. In spite of the storm, he orders the men to wait an hour, to lull the U-boat into a false sense of security. Then the Avengers will go on the hunt again.
If there's one lesson the Allied had learned in the First and Second World War, fighting the U-boats, was keep them busy, keep them away.
Aircraft are the best weapons for the job. 2 Avenger torpedo bombers launch at 11:15 p.m. In just over an hour, one spots U-515, again on the surface. The Avenger unloads 2 depth bombs. Still on the surface, the men of U-515 return fire with their deck gun. Then, Henke orders the U-boat to dive. The Avenger loses contact. Though they have just been spotted again, Henke rejects a suggestion to shake off their pursuers by reversing course. It is not clear to him that the aircraft came from nearby ships.
As long as he has not contact with his hydrophones, he probably thinks he's quite safe, so danger is not imminent. But it turns out he's wrong.
Gallery's night flying experiment is already a success, with 2 U-boat sightings in just a few hours. He is eager to put the rest of the task group to the test. April 9th, 1944, Easter Sunday. Once again, Henke's batteries are running out of power.
Henke has to surface his boat, whether he wants it or not. because without a minimum charge of the batteries, he is virtually helpless. He can't dive, he can't evade any danger.
There has been no sign of their stalkers for hours. Henke decides to surface. He is careful to put as many lookouts and gunners as he can on deck. The skies stay clear, but only for 45 minutes. Lookout spots something off the port quarter. They identify warships, including an aircraft carrier heading their way. At that very moment, an Avenger drops out of the sky, right on top of them. U-515's gunners fire on the enemy, but the 37mm gun jams. Luckily, the twin-mount 20mm guns still work. The Avenger pilot drops depth bombs, but U-515's retaliation forces him to bank away. Thanks to the gunners, the bombs fall short of U-515. Henke immediately orders a crash dive. On board USS Guadalcanal, along with more fighter planes, Gallery orders destroyer escorts USS Pillsbury and Flaherty to locate and engage the enemy.
All ahead flank.
Destroyer escorts carry a new weapon called the Hedgehog.
It was called a hedgehog because it looked like a bunch of porcupine quills. It fired 24 mortar rounds. They made a circular pattern in the water.
The actual new feature is that you can keep your sonar contact with the U-boat while attacking. They don't interfere with your detection signal, so you can keep the contact and go in for another attack.
Henke has ordered U-515 to dive to about 660 feet. For an agonizing 30 minutes, the men wait for the expected depth charges. Then they hear propellers, so they know the ships are closing in. With USS Flaherty in support, Pillsbury launches a Hedgehog attack.
Open fire.
One round makes contact and explodes. It must have struck with a glancing blow. Had it landed squarely on the U-boat and exploded, the pressure hull would have cracked. Desperate to escape, Henke has a risky plan. At 600 feet, U-515 nears the maximum diving depth of the submarine. He will have to dive deeper to evade the Hedgehog rounds, but he may push the U-boat past its limits. April 9th, 1944. German U-boat U-515 is pinned down by a hunter-killer group.
Open fire.
Its destroyer escorts drop rounds of Hedgehog mortars. In a bid to escape, U-boat commander Werner Henke orders his submarine deeper, below maximum diving depth.
No U-boat commander knows actually the crash depth of his U-boat. There's a safe margin, and everything over this safe margin is simply a matter of trial and error.
So far, the U-boat is holding. Henke still needs to find a way to escape the ships. He still has an ace up his sleeve, a decoy device called a bolt.
It's a small cylinder filled with a chemical. He presses outside to a special tube, and as soon as this chemical gets into contact with the water, it starts to make bubbles. It's almost like an Alka-Seltzer in a glass of water. These gas bubbles in the water give the imagination of a U-boat.
The compound of calcium and zinc create masses of underwater bubbles and simulate the echo of a submarine.
We got sonar bearing 135.
Bring her around.
Bring it around!
It works. The decoys confuse the destroyer escorts. Henke's men can hear the propeller sounds moving away from them. Above, destroyer escort USS Chatelaine joins the search with Flaherty and Pillsbury. They are all going the wrong way. They search for 2 hours, but the U-boat has vanished. Gallery keeps planes in the air on constant lookout, but they find nothing.
That means that if the submarine is close and they've lost track of it, there is a chance that the submarine commander won't feel he's on the run, that he'll turn the tables.
Gallery calls in his 4th destroyer escort, USS Pope, to protect the carrier.
Sonar contact.
Pope's sonar picks up a contact 700 yards away.
Bearing 090.
We've got contact bearing 090.
They found U-515.
Launch Hedgehogs.
USS Pope launches the first of 2 Hedgehog attacks. Both miss.
They realized that the submarine is probably too deep for a Hedgehog attack to work.
Instead, USS Pope launches continuous patterns of depth charges.
One of the detonations of the depth charges creates a leak in the boat, and the problem is, because of the depth the boat is sailing, there's a high pressure of water, so this water rushes in, and in a very limited period of time a huge amount of water is getting into the boat, and so it's getting out of balance.
To compensate, they shift water around internally, moving it forward from one tank to another to rebalance the U-boat. Meanwhile, topside, USS Pope slows to 10 knots to get a read on where their prey is hiding. USS Pope prepares a pattern of depth charges at point-blank range. Henke tries to anticipate his enemy's next move. He attempts a hairpin turn to evade the attack.
He decides for a last-ditch maneuver. He tries to swing out his U-boat out of the range of the depth charge. He's trying to play every trick he has ever learned, and probably finding some new ones just to evade the next depth charge.
Everything depends on the U-boat's turning ability. If it doesn't move fast enough, U-515 could suffer severe damage. USS Pope launches 13 depth charges directly above them. The U-boat moves just far enough. The depth charges strike U-515's aft deck and roll off before detonating.
The depth charge does not have to hit the U-boat. We have a nearby explosion. The shockwave rips open one of the ballast tanks and breaks some pipelines.
More water, now mixed with fuel oil, floods the after torpedo room. The weight of the water drags the stern of the U-boat down by over 20 degrees. Altenberger works frantically to plug the leaks while crewmen run forward, trying to bring balance to the U-boat with their own weight. On the surface, USS Pope's captain keeps a constant watch for the telltale signs of a submarine sinking. USS Chatelaine comes to assist in the attack. On U-515, an exhausted Altenberger has plugged the most critical leaks. He warns Henke that the U-515 cannot take any more damage.
Drop depth charges.
But USS Pope lays 3 more patterns of depth charges. The last round knocks Altenberger's improvised plugs loose.
leaks spring open again, and the situation becomes more and more hopeless for the boat and the crew.
They try to secure the watertight hatch to the motor room so the water doesn't go any further into the U-boat. But one of the bolts is broken. Rising water continues to stream in.
If the electric engine room is flooded, if electricity supply breaks down, you're absolutely helpless. You can't use your pumps anymore. You don't have any propulsion anymore, so the vessel is a dead wreck.
U-515 plunges as the water rushes to the rear of the submarine.
Ich brauche Schadensmeldungen.
Henke increases speed and jettisons fuel. He fights a desperate battle to level the U-boat and stop it from sinking. April 9th, 1944. U-515 plummets by its stern after a severe depth charge attack. U-boat commander Werner Henke and his crew work frantically and finally blow the main ballast tank. By replacing the water in the tank with air, it should lighten the submarine. At last, at a depth of about 660 feet, U-515 returns to balance. But then the submarine overcorrects. Water from the stern moves forward, which makes the bow heavier. Instead of gaining an even keel, the entire U-boat now rises rapidly to the surface by the stern. Topside, however, the Americans haven't gone anywhere.
As the U-515 is rapidly ascending, the Pope loses its sonar contact. But now USS Chatelain's sonar operator has been able to get a lock on the submarine.
Bridge CIC, we have a confirmed U-boat contact.
Her commanding officer orders a depth charge attack. All of a sudden, the U-boat breaks the surface, out of control and at a very sharp angle. Henke gives the order to abandon ship. He climbs onto the bridge. The destroyer escorts Pope, Chatelain, and Flaherty encircle U-515, while Pillsbury and the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal close in.
The American vessels surrounding him and airplanes flowing over his head. And yeah, so this was the moment of defeat.
The Allied ships mistake Henke's surrender for an attack.
Germans are pouring out of the U-515. Gallery and his men think that the Germans are attempting to man their guns and open fire. So they open fire first.
Open fire.
Shell strikes the lower platform of the conning tower and ignites hydrogen bottles that are stored there. They immediately set off ammunition so that there's a huge fire and an enormous plume of white smoke pouring up from the submarine.
Avengers also target U-515 with rockets. Gathered in the forward compartments of the U-boat, some of the men don't hear the order to abandon ship. As word gets passed, others escape through the hatches and avoid the heaviest fire. Wildcat fighter planes continue to strafe the U-boat, killing several crewmen in the water.
Ceasefire.
Ceasefire! Ceasefire!
What happens to Henke immediately after the sinking of the U-515? He's rescued by the Chatelaine, and that same day he's transferred to the Guadalcanal.
Gallery's task group would go on to sink U-boat U-68 the very next day. His night-flying sorties from escort carriers are so successful that the U.S. Navy adopts them full-time. Knowledge gained from the sinking of U-515 inspires Gallery to capture a U-boat. On his next patrol, he seizes U-505 intact.
Gallery understood how much that mattered. He was a beneficiary of that kind of intelligence, and he knew that he wanted to help. He wasn't capturing it as some kind of trophy, he was capturing it specifically because of what it would yield. That's a lot more sophisticated than people might imagine.
Werner Henke's story would end very differently. On board Guadalcanal, he reveals to someone that he had once been named a war criminal in a broadcast by the Allies. Word travels to Captain Gallery, who hopes Henke will answer questions more fully if he fears being turned over to the British. Gallery uses the opportunity to present a forged letter from British officials asking for Henke's transfer to their custody to be tried for war crimes. The threat works. Henke agrees to cooperate with intelligence interrogations.
As Gallery pointed out in his memoirs, he would never, ever have turned over the men that he'd captured from his unit's efforts to British authorities. Therefore, Gallery always intended they would come to the United States.
On May 3rd, 1944, the U.S. Navy transfers Werner Henke from its custody to Fort Hunt, a secret interrogation center outside Washington, D.C.
Henke has pledged that he would cooperate in his intelligence interrogations.
Henke now refuses to answer their questions.
He would say later that this pledge from me was obtained under duress, and as a German naval officer, it is improper for me to cooperate, and he does not.
Authorities decide that the best thing to do is to send him to Canada, where many other U-boat POWs are held. Henke learns of the transfer.
In his mind, he is now going to be turned over to the British for what will obviously be a show trial and likely execution.
On the evening of June 15th, 1944, Werner Henke goes out for his daily hour-long exercise period.
55 minutes into that exercise time, he suddenly makes a bolt for the first barrier of barbed wire.
After crossing the barbed wire, he starts to climb a fence.
He is called on to stop by a guard in the sentry tower. When he refuses to stop, he is shot. One bullet will strike him through the head. Two others at least will strike him in the body.
Kapitän Leutnant Werner Henke, one of Germany's last U-boat aces, is dead.
There is no other U-boat captain who achieved as much in the way of sinkings as did Werner Henke from September 1942 to 1944.
So for the Kriegsmarine, every loss, especially the loss of quite a prominent U-boat commander, is of course a serious drawback also to keep up war morale. It's a severe loss.
The deadly toll would continue. But as the sinking of U-515 clearly showed, U-boat commanders like Werner Henke had mastered the tactics so well, the Allies had to commit powerful resources to finally defeat the U-boat threat.